The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 166. Cairo's First Sword. Part 1. It was a shocking sight. His face, which showed confidence, looked odd with his sunken cheekbones and blood flowing down his swollen nose. Zaren's eyes were out of focus. He didn't even think about looking at Roman Dimitri's face, and even as he spoke of his surrender he was trembling like a lost child. This. Go to Zaren. Count Gregory's people stormed to the stage. Zaren was a person Count Gregory cherished the most, so he couldn't handle anything going wrong with him. It was a scene he couldn't accept despite seeing it with his own eyes. Even when Zaren was still on stage and the people were speechless about what just happened, Zaren was being treated. People said that the matches would be different starting from the 10th ranker. This wasn't just some mere lie. Zaren was someone who proved his worth all the time. So it didn't make sense for him to lose like this. People would have heartily applauded if Zaren had knelt at the end of a fierce battle, but their minds couldn't accept such a one-sided match. And Roman was standing tall on the stage. While everyone was silently watching, Roman looked around the crowd. The plan has been laid out. The fights until now were just appetizers for his plan. Cairo was a small nation. At least at this moment, he thought to imprint on everyone what kind of existence Roman Dimitri was. Roman said, "To be honest, I am a little disappointed. 1 year ago, I declared this. What do you think was the reason? I didn't need time to hone myself. I just wanted the rankers in Cairo with whom I would be dealing in the future to be ready. And this is the result that I see." He wasn't polite to the losers. He ridiculed Zaren. Roman openly emphasized how terrible a swordsman he was. "I found out after defeating Zaren, the 10th ranker. Other than Count Nicholas, there is no one who can handle my sword in Cairo. Therefore, I will omit all the meaningless steps. 3 days later, in the same location as today, I will face the rankers from the 9th to the 2nd in order." At that moment, people were shocked. What did it mean? They heard it with their own ears, but they couldn't understand it. "And I will defeat them all and then challenge the first sword of Cairo." Roman's words shocked everyone. It was Roman Dimitri who showed them outstanding sights, but these words were too much. It was certain now. Roman Dimitri wasn't an arrogant man, rather he was a madman. Cairo was in a mess again because of Roman's declaration. Defeating the rankers in order from the 99th to the top itself was already a huge accomplishment, but he said that he would deal with the top rankers one after another. This was shocking. And the protagonists of these remarks gathered in one place. What do we do? To be honest, I am thinking of surrendering. There isn't much difference in Zaren's skills and mine, and didn't Roman Dimitri take him down with an overwhelming force? Bruno, the 9th ranker, said. On that day, Bruno watched the match. He went there to find out more about his opponent and prepare in areas where he was weak, but when he saw what happened, he was terrified. This wasn't someone he could deal with. In a fight where his defeat was clear, he didn't want to make a harsh decision and end up like Zaren to save his pride. The man sitting across from him, Oscar, the 2nd ranker, said, "But still, you cannot surrender. Mr. Oscar. There is no one following the king's side here. So if we let Roman Dimitri take on Count Nicholas, the result is effortless and beneficial." But Roman Dimitri mocked Zaren. He cut him down in front of everyone while saying that he wasn't worthy of the top 10 rankings, and then he declared war, saying that he would take all of us on the same day. This problem isn't so simple. If Roman Dimitri loses to Count Nicholas, people will mock us for being cowards for surrendering and giving Roman Dimitri the 2nd place without a fight. It was a matter of pride this time. From the moment people's eyes were focused on them, they couldn't step back. "So you want to deal with Roman Dimitri?" It was the 5th ranker who asked. Everyone here was offended by Roman's words. However, keeping their personal emotions aside, there wasn't a single person who wouldn't acknowledge the skills of Roman Dimitri. He was a monster who made his way from the 99th rank to the 10th. witnessing Roman Dmitri defeat the rankers of Cairo without even taking a rest. Cairo's rankers began to respect him. They were sure that Roman Dmitri was a talent the nation should be proud to have. Everyone acknowledged him, even though he was young. And Oscar said, "Yes. We have to directly deal with him. That's why I called you all together. I don't have the confidence to defeat him, and I am cautious about this proposal because it forces you to sacrifice a lot, but please make sure that Roman Dmitri gets as exhausted as he can when he reaches for me. The compensation will be guaranteed by Marquis Benedict, whom I serve. And if we join forces like this..." The look in his eyes changed. It was his pride of being second. Knowing that Marquis Benedict wanted Roman, he didn't want Roman to pass through. "I will risk my life to defeat him. And in front of everyone, I will say that if it wasn't for you all, I would have never won." Hearing Oscar's words, the rankers looked at each other. They didn't like the role of being the sacrifice. If it weren't for Roman's taunt, they wouldn't have even gathered in such a place. But now that their plan was laid out, their pride wasn't allowing them to step back. "We will follow your plan. Roman Dmitri, let's show that guy the reality." "What? Knock us all down in one day? I promise that I will end him before he even reaches Mr. Oscar." "You are right. Let's join forces." The rankers were bustling with enthusiasm. They cried and cheered about overthrowing Roman Dmitri and began to make plans all night long. Exactly 3 days later, Roman appeared at the promised place and waited with the crowd gathering, and soon the rankers appeared. Oh! From Bruno to Oscar. They really showed up. From the 9th ranker to the 2nd. I never thought they'd respond to Roman Dmitri's taunt. If this happens, then the winner cannot be predicted. After the fight with Zarin, people asserted that Count Nicholas was the only one who could defeat Roman. But dealing with 8 swordsmen at once was a different thing. And they weren't just some beginners. They were rankers who had great reputations all over Cairo. Everyone on the Western Front was proud of Bruno, and didn't he show a strong presence against the powerful Kronos Empire? The 8 swordsmen appeared one after another. And as Roman was looking at them, he recalled the report he received days ago. The faction of the nobles led by Marquis Benedict is gathering troops, and perhaps their purpose is me and not a rebellion. If I decline Marquis Benedict's offer, he seems to be willing to take this to the extreme. It was a predictable move. What was the reason for the nobles' faction to be trembling now? It might be difficult to touch Kronos or Valhalla with their force, but they were still the group of people who managed to take the 3rd position in the nation's power system, and they had even driven the royal family's faction to a corner. Even in the Cairo kingdom, they were able to create an atmosphere where everyone followed their words. It was interesting. The rankers in front of him didn't side with the royal faction, so they decided to join forces while following the words of another faction. This was the reality. Unless they sided with the royal family, everyone turned to the nobles' side. The power system in Cairo will not allow me any more time. This will be a road with a dead end. Will I eat them, or will they eat me? At the crossroads, I will have to choose. He smiled. This was the moment that he had been patiently waiting for. The peace had lasted too long, and Roman didn't like it very much. It was the start of the finale. Tack. Roman went up to the stage. No more questions and no more answers. From now on, it was time for him to show them the reality. At first, it seemed like a plausible plan. Roman Dmitri will try to end the fight soon. In a situation where he has to deal with 8 rankers, he will want to avoid a long-term battle. The arrogant brat made a mistake. If we hadn't united, we might have rushed to him like moths to a flame and fallen one after another. Bruno had one purpose: to defend. After raising his aura to protect his body, he was going to drag out the battle for as long as possible. He didn't have the confidence to win. But if he was determined and persevered, he was confident that no matter how great the difference in their skills was, he would be able to tire out Roman. But... The moment he blocked Roman's attack, Bruno's eyes widened. This was different from what he had expected. His sword, wrapped with aura, should have blocked the attack from Roman Dmitri, but his sword split into two. This was a shocking scene. Bruno felt something pierce his chest without even having a chance to counter. Whack! Blood splattered. He didn't die, but the sword did go through his chest, and Bruno collapsed. Next, silence fell. Those who expected a fierce match went speechless upon witnessing this. But still, this was the first match, and Bruno was the 9th ranker, so they thought it would be different. Kong! The sword bounced. The 8th ranker also tried to block Roman's attack, but just like Bruno, his sword was cut in half, and he barely blocked it. This was the best that the 8th ranker could do. Roman's fist dug into his stomach, and he slammed his face on the floor as he coughed out everything. Next. 1 minute. The 3rd one, the 7th ranker, went up looking nervous and didn't hold on for long, as his mind was already giving up. Whack. It was purely overwhelming. Roman's aura showed destructive power that couldn't be blocked by his 5-star aura, and no matter how much he tried to block him, he couldn't prepare for the next counter. The 7th ranker had also spent a significant amount of time in the spotlight. He wasn't the type to fall down like an unknown swordsman, so when he lost, the people were silent. Next. The 4th person. The 5th person. The 6th person. The matches continued. The plan that they put together all night long had no meaning as every one of them was collapsing. As time went on, people's faces turned pale. The result must be in line with common sense for them to show admiration, but this was too intimidating for those watching. Everyone here didn't know much about Roman. Baek Jung-hyuk, the heavenly demon, took over the body of Roman Dmitri, and was equipped with the power to defeat Butler in a very short time. And how long was it? Just barely a year's time. And the move that shocked people was only the result of his short time of training. And he spent the last year not giving out much information about himself. People only remembered the Roman from a year ago, but the present Roman had undergone many changes. And when he made this plan, Oscar and the others were just small puppies that he didn't even have to think much about. No matter how strong they were only frogs in a well who weren't even listed in the continent's ranking. Whack! The 3rd ranker collapsed, and as he fell to the ground bleeding, the shocked faces behind him could be seen. This makes no sense. Among them was Oscar, who was now looking pale. He was speechless as the sun rose in the middle of the sky, despite having declared that he would win at any cost against Roman if the others exhausted him. The fight started at noon, but the sun was still in the middle of the sky, and the stage was already full of blood marks. Only then did he realize that Roman Dmitri was a monster that Cairo couldn't handle. Next. This was a death sentence. Hearing Roman's voice calling out to him, Oscar tightly closed his eyes. Chapter 167. Cairo's First Sword. Part 2. At the empty palace, Daniel Cairo impatiently waited for someone in a royal knight's attire. Creak. The door opened and his gaze turned there. The knight went inside, after paying respects to the king, and spoke of what he saw. It was an overwhelming win. After taking down Bruno, who came up first at once, he even knocked down Oscar in less than 30 minutes. Your Majesty, my king, Roman Dmitri defeated all the 9th to the 2nd rankers in just one day. There is no reason to stop him from challenging the top place. The knight spoke in a low voice. He knew what the result that was just mentioned now meant. The people of Cairo would simply cheer for an event that would go down in history, but Daniel Cairo couldn't do that. In the end, this happened. His voice trembled. Right in front of him, he looked at the man who was looking at him. The man had gray hair that was neatly brushed back and had a robust body even though he was in his 60s. The pattern of the Royal Knights was engraved on his chest. And the sun crest proved that he was the best swordsman among the Royal Knights. Count Nicholas. Yes. Is there any way to avoid this fight with Roman Dmitri? I do not doubt that you are the best sword in Cairo, but I can only think of one possibility. Lately, the nobles have been moving, and even Marquis Benedict is in a precarious position now. In this situation, if the first sword of Cairo falls, my position with no power will fall prey to the nobles. In the past few years, Count Nicholas has become a support system to protect the royal family. For the sole reason that he swore allegiance to the king, the nobles didn't try to do anything. So that was why his presence was absolute. Oscar had challenged for the top position, but after losing overwhelmingly without even lasting for a minute, he didn't try again. But what if he would be put down to his knees? Then it would mean the collapse of power. And it was clear that if the absolute existence would collapse, everyone's suppressed desires would burst out. Count Nicholas said, "I understand very well what your highness is worried about. That is why we cannot avoid this challenge." Marquis Benedict's faction of nobles didn't rebel because they lacked strength. They just hate to lose the power system they worked so hard to establish crumble, but they still have the strength to do anything they want. If I refuse Roman Dimitri's challenge, I might be able to keep the title given to me, but if that happens, Marquis Benedict will not think of my existence as a threat. The four factions and the precarious system of power. Marquis Benedict didn't unreasonably raise issues since he considered what would happen if he started a rebellion. And in the end, Count Nicholas was all alone. There was a possibility that he could be defeated, but the balance was kept because, before falling, Count Nicholas would shed a lot of blood. So it was a truce. But from the moment Roman defeated Oscar, Count Nicholas had no choice. An absolute who ignores the challenge of a challenger has no meaning. Trust me. I will defeat Roman Dimitri and once again prove why I am the top sword of Cairo. A strong challenger appeared, which made it even more meaningful. Count Nicholas stood up from his spot and showed the appearance of a giant. "Then I shall go." On his way to the palace, he heard a familiar voice. "Are you really all right?" Regardless of victory or defeat, the hyenas of Cairo will not stand still if you get injured. It was Ventnor. He was the person who sought out Roman Dimitri on behalf of the king in the past. He looked at Count Nicholas with worried eyes. "It has already been more than 60 years since I began to follow the Cairo royal family. It doesn't matter if I am fine or not. It has to be done, and I will do it," Count Nicholas said. He looked through the window, and in the blinding sunlight came the memories of the past. "Nicholas, take care of my son for me, please." It was the former king. Daniel Cairo's father talked to Count Nicholas on his deathbed. He was a truly weak human being. Count Nicholas lived for the Cairo royal family from the moment he was born and was loyal to the king. The collapse of the power system in the kingdom was due to the former king. If he hadn't neglected the fights happening within the kingdom, then the royal family would have been holding the power now. But he still couldn't blame the king. The weakness in the royal family symbolized his incompetence, but the king was a kind human being. When the king saw how tired Nicholas was from his rigorous training each day, he gave him a cure. He even stole him away to goof around, and whenever he ate good food, he would invite his people to eat together with him. They were good times. Soon, the ignorant child turned into a sword, representing the Cairo kingdom, and the king, who was shining like the sun, collapsed at the viciousness of the position he held. There was no way to protect him. Eliminating the threats was the best Count Nicholas could do, so he felt determined to become stronger. Finally, the king died, and even though people called him the top sword of Cairo, he couldn't stop the division. Smirk. Smile. Facing the sunlight outside the window, the face of the previous king kept coming to his mind. "When I said I would follow King Daniel, everyone called me a moron." The former king died, and Count Nicholas was subjected to so many temptations. If he had held on to one of them, he might be living a different life now, but not once did he regret it. Ventnor. Yes. What kind of man is Roman Dimitri? He changed the subject since this was no time to dwell on memories. Reality hit them, and it was now time to focus on what was right in front of them. Ventnor thought for a moment. He only talked one time with the man, yet the memory was so vivid. Actually, I cannot say anything for sure about Roman Dmitri. But at the time when he was still underappreciated, he was confident about his path. He is a person born to be a natural predator, and if he didn't have the confidence to win, he wouldn't have started the ranking matches either. From the 99th to the 1st, everyone called him reckless, but it is clear that he will prove himself and eventually appear before Count Nicholas. That was what Count Nicholas also believed. However, he wasn't sure of winning this time. So be careful. If you fall, the royal family is done for. On the next day, the sun was bright. In Kairos, the capital of Cairo, a huge crowd gathered. The people who filled the path parted like waves when one person walked through. Step. It was Roman Dmitri. He took a step. And as he held his sword, he calmly accepted the gazes of the people. He arrived at a huge mansion, which was his destination. And as he entered through the gate that was wide open, he could see the people surrounding him and the man waiting for him in the center. It was the existence called the first sword of the Cairo kingdom. Count Nicholas looked at Roman Dmitri and said, "Roman Dmitri, I have faced many challenges in the past, but none as arrogant and bold as you." He spoke with pure admiration. From the 99th rank to the 1st, Roman Dmitri rose from the bottom. The people's doubts turned into shock, and now they anticipated seeing something exciting. You are just in your mid-20s. You are undoubtedly born with the qualities to make a name for yourself beyond the Cairo kingdom and even the continent. But not now. I, Richard Nicholas, will exist as the greatest sword of Cairo until the moment I rest. Shoo. He drew his sword, turning the atmosphere heavy. The two hadn't done anything yet, but the people went silent at the suffocating feeling. Come. I will show you the wall of reality. At that moment. Flutter. Willis gave the signal. And. Rumble. Roman Dmitri rushed at Count Nicholas. Quang. Rumble. The fight was intense right from the start. Roman tried to attack right away, not wanting to waste time, and unlike his previous opponents, Count Nicholas countered Roman head-on. Aura exploded. It felt like the earth and sky were shaking with each clash, but neither of the two backed out. Flash. The move that took down Zarin. As the space-slicing attack was about to slash his forearm, the Count lunged ahead as he swung his sword. Kong. And at the same time, he tried to counter. Roman retrieved his sword and blocked the opponent's attack, and this time, he made the attack he used to take down the third ranker. It was a chain attack that struck forward. Count Nicholas's face distorted as he wasn't given time to gasp for breath, and the attack was being aimed at his head, arms, body, and legs. The third ranker wasn't able to withstand this at all. Although this attack was fast and scary, Count Nicholas's sword was calm. Kong. Cocking. The fight was in a huge open space, but it was difficult for the people watching them to follow them with their eyes, so they moved back a couple of steps at their clashes. 4 attacks. 4 defenses. Count Nicholas's presence was huge. Meanwhile, Roman's attacks were strong. No one was able to block his attacks properly, and they faced a one-sided defeat that put their reputation as rankers to shame. So the people were doubtful. But this clearly showed why Count Nicholas was the greatest sword, and he seemed so different from the others. In particular, people began to question their memories as they watched Oscar, who ranked second in the rankings, helplessly collapse. But their memories weren't wrong. Count Nicholas's skills were truly unparalleled. Unlike the other rankers in Cairo, who couldn't even withstand 5 hits, he had already exchanged more than 20 with Roman. And it was then. Tack. There was a gap in the attack. And Count Nicholas's eyes changed. A vortex of powerful aura rose, and his sword moved to slash down his opponent. It was a threatening move, and this time, he planned to give a strong blow to Roman Dmitri. But. Quang. Rumble. Roman Dmitri easily blocked it. It wasn't like he was expecting it, but it was more like he only reacted when he saw it. Shoo! The Count was pushed back, making him grin. "You are an interesting man." From the start until the end, Roman Dimitri's attitude and expression didn't change, nor did he appear like a challenger. As if he was the best in Cairo, he didn't back down at all and pushed forward. It was interesting. It surely was. Roman Dimitri wasn't afraid of him at all. One mistake and I will lose. This was the reality. Clench. He straightened his sword, and mana began to seethe from him. Cairo's best sword, his own attack began. Chapter 168. Cairo's First Sword. Part 3. Richard Nicholas, the first ranker in Cairo. People acknowledged this man as the best sword in Cairo, but they also said that they would not live life the way he did. What pleasures does the Count live by? Even though he has been the best for a long time, instead of enjoying wealth and honor, he goes back to relive his training days each day. What a boring person. If I had the skills like his, I would live a comfortable life by siding with Marquis Benedict. But there was a time when Count Nicholas also thought of such things. And his schedule felt boring. According to his servant, he lived at the training grounds most of the day except for the time he meditated in the mornings. From the basic movements to advanced sword skills, Count Nicholas would be drenched in sweat as he kept repeating the process and sparring with his subordinates. That was his schedule from morning to evening. And when he skipped his external duties as a royal knight, he would focus on his sword technique. And he was now over 60 years old. Even though he was the best swordsman in his youth, considering the social status he held, no one understood why he still lived on the training grounds. But he still continued to live the same way. No matter what people said about him, the sword never left his hands. The reason? Because he liked it? Because he was crazy for swords? No. At the end of the day, Count Nicholas forcibly closed his eyes from the aura rising from within him. I don't want to live this fiercely either. In his 60 years of life, he lived his entire life for the royal family. Count Nicholas, who was flogged for being lazy in sword training when he was young, was now a pillar of support for the royal family. He knew it too. What would happen the moment he became a little weak? And the fact that the Cairo royal family was bound to collapse like a sand castle due to the evil people aiming for the throne. That couldn't happen. The royal family was everything Nicholas had. His blind feelings for the family, which had been imprinted in his head, turned Count Nicholas into someone who treasured the family, even if people thought it was boring. And so he held his resolve. And when he heard the rumors that Roman Dimitri had defeated Butler, the Count went to the training grounds and continued to train against an imaginary opponent all day long. Daniel Cairo and the former king's smiles and kind words gave the Count a reason to live. The existence that people called great believed and followed the value of mere humans. One day, his son who lived a normal life unlike him asked, "Father, why do you do that?" His father was exhausted each day. Contrary to his fame and name, his father would always return home with a shabby appearance. At the words of his son, who gave up the sword because he didn't want to be like him, Count Nicholas showed a heartfelt smile. "Son, I am the first sword of Cairo. People call Cairo a small nation and look down on us, but in the small nation called Cairo, I am an existence that no one can approach. That is the purpose of my life." And today, people didn't know the fact that in order to face Roman Dimitri, who was a young challenger, the Count had been preparing for a year before the ranking matches were even announced. Cairo's first sword, Richard Nicholas, was completely different from the others that Roman had stepped on. Rumble. The ground shook. In the middle of a violently raging sandstorm, Count Nicholas pushed Roman. Kong. Cock-a-king. His face changed. In the beginning, Roman led the attack, but this time, the Count was the one leading. Roman Dimitri doesn't run. Last year, Count Nicholas studied the data about Roman. The testimonies of when Roman faced Homer, the battles on the southern front, and when he defeated Butler, he kept all the facts that were informative in his head. People would ask why the person considered the best in the nation was wary of a young man in his mid-20s, but the Count was the type that did his best in everything he did. The opponent was brilliant and talented, and if he couldn't overcome him with talent, then he had to press him down with experience. Kwang! There was a huge roar. With the goal of not letting his opponent run away, he deliberately raised his aura. Since the aura that distorted the atmosphere couldn't be stopped just by dodging, Roman raised his sword to block it. Kong! Kakang! And that was when it started. Roman Dmitri attacked with the best moves he could think of. Instead of judging with his eyes, he began to continuously attack under the assumption that the opponent would block all his attacks. Right, left, and overhead. Continuing to change the pattern of his attacks, Roman Dmitri blocked all the chances to prevent the Count from coming up with a new move. One breath. The price to pay was high. Cairo's first sword attacked by taking the initiative in one flow. Wow! This is the best sword in Cairo. The people who were looking from afar were shocked at this. Even though they couldn't properly see the fight because of the sandstorm, Count Nicholas displayed a tremendous presence. They were certain that Count Nicholas was an existence different from the others. Oscar, who was ranked second, wasn't even in the continental rankings, but Count Nicholas ranked 80th. And that was 5 years ago. Even after that, this man never neglected his training, and the people said that if he challenged others, his rank would rise. He was at the age of 60 and he was starting to get old. However, he clearly demonstrated how he was able to support the power system in Cairo. Kwang! Rumble! Aura exploded. Count Nicholas made his way through the storm. To protect the honor of the royal family and to prove that he was strong, he never delayed his attacks since he knew that he could die from a single mistake. Just like that, Count Nicholas was roaring. And the more his presence burned, the more Roman Dmitri also began to burn. Count Nicholas was strong. Living as Roman Dmitri, he had met a lot of people, but he was sure that none of them were as strong as the Count. He is one level higher than Butler. The fight was intense, and it made his blood boil. Ever since he stayed silent for the past year, Roman has waited for a moment like this. Kong! Kakakang! He swung his sword. To meet his opponent's intention and respond to him, he fought him head-on. Without backing down at all, Roman Dmitri countered the opponent's attack head-on. Rumble. There was a great rumble. The head-to-head fight drained their minds, but both of them didn't back down. The first sword of Cairo? No, the stronger the opponent, the better. Roman Dmitri just wanted to crush his opponent with force. Count Nicholas is strong. But in the end, he is only strong by the standards of Cairo. There are dozens of beings on the continent that are stronger than him, and I cannot even predict how many of them haven't revealed their identities to the world. For the future, I need to overwhelm Count Nicholas. He acknowledged his opponent. If he had been on the same level as Oscar, Roman Dmitri would have ended the fight without prolonging it for another second. Flash. Nicholas moved to attack. His sword, which was covered in aura, fell like stars from the sky. Roman stepped forward. Following his opponent's intention, he also raised his aura to counter it. Kwang! Rumble! There was a series of clashes as the two continuously collided. As if the fight would end with a single hit, they didn't want to back out. Kwang! Just one hit, but Count Nicholas's expression changed. It was subtle, but he could feel his body bounce a little at the repulsive force. Kwang! It was the same this time too. He raised his strength more than before, but he was only pushed back further. Kwang! Kwakwang! Every time they clashed, Count Nicholas was being pushed back little by little. He obviously had the upper hand at the start, but the more he faced his opponent, the more he saw a new reality. As if his body was wet from rain, the results piled up once again. The fact that he was being pushed back further made him belatedly realize something was wrong. I am being pushed back by strength. It was at that moment that the people who were watching began to realize that the flow of the fight was going in a strange direction. People had a particular image in their minds prior to this fight. If Roman Dmitri caused an uproar here, they thought it wouldn't be from an overwhelming fight. Roman Dmitri is just in his mid-20s. No matter how great a swordsman he is, he cannot compete with the aura of Count Nicholas, who is trained for 60 years. Because Count Nicholas is superior in every way, Roman Dmitri must devise a variable that will allow him to win. That was what everyone thought, but the results in front of their eyes were different. Quang. Count Nicholas was being pushed back. At first, he was only pushed back so little that it wasn't noticeable, but now it was one step after another. Quang. This time, he was pushed back behind the line. Count Nicholas gritted his teeth. The more he blocked Roman Dmitri's sword, the more disgusted he was feeling. This makes no sense. He was shocked. He was not different from the others. He prepared for a year to face Roman Dmitri, but he never thought that he would be crushed like this. It was not arrogance but confidence in himself. Because of his experience for 60 years, he was sure that the aura of a swordsman in his mid-20s wouldn't be much. His common sense crumbled. The opponent was a monster. People called the Count a genius, but even in the realm of geniuses, Roman appeared to be stronger. Quang. Rumble. He was now pushed all the way back. Cough. In an instant, he coughed up blood. The shock of the constant attacks made thick blood drip down his mouth as if his organs were messed up. The eye-catching red drops of blood continued to drip down, and the Count sighed. Being the supporting power of the Cairo royal family, he tried so hard to not make it collapse, and he was wary of the nobles' faction but not of the young blood. What if he lost? Roman Dmitri was claiming to be neutral, but he would never help the king. According to what he knew about him, this man was a practical person. Unlike him, who had devoted his life to being loyal one-sidedly, Roman would never do that to the royal family. I can't lose. He gritted his teeth and gulped. He suppressed the disgusting smell of blood, and he looked at his opponent. It was funny how Roman Dmitri was giving him time, as if telling him to calm down and fight him again with all his might. Seeing the guy who was just a challenger act like the champion, the Count raised his aura. Fine, I am not grateful at this consideration. Rumble. He held his sword one last time. If even this attack failed, then there was no way to defeat Roman Dmitri. Tack. Rumble. He kicked the ground. This time, Roman Dmitri confronted him head-on. Aura explosion. It was Count Nicholas's secret. When he manifested the power that made him the 80th ranker, the aura surrounding his sword burned like a volcano. This is the end. It was then that the Count clearly saw it. Even facing an aura that burned like it would devour the world, and even if one understood what it meant, Roman Dmitri didn't dodge the attack. Quang. Quakwang. Chapter 169. Cairo's First Sword. Part 4. Rumble. The earth shook. The shockwaves on the ground caused the onlookers to stumble or be thrown backward, and the outcome of the fight was obscured by a cloud of dust that prevented them from seeing it. This wasn't a fight between humans. The people who were now covered in dust just looked around with shocked faces. Whoosh. The wind blew. And once the situation was revealed, everyone's eyes went wide. Thud. Cough. Count Nicholas was down on one knee. Even as blood flowed from his mouth and nose, he raised his head and looked at the man in front of him. Was I defeated? In their last clash, Count Nicholas did his best. He was convinced that the head-to-head confrontation would be a sure move, but Roman didn't back down and attacked him head-on. And this was the result. Even his own attack, which he had trained for 60 years, was unable to defeat Roman Dmitri, and he ended up coughing up blood. And the sight of Roman looking down at him with an unstrained face made him feel more miserable. This is it. The match was decided, with Roman Dmitri as the winner. It was his turn to admit defeat, but Count Nicholas forced himself to get up. Drip. Blood was flowing down from his arm. His whole body wouldn't listen to him, and he gritted his teeth as he raised his sword. Continue. His voice cracked. The willingness to accept the victor was said to be a virtue of a swordsman, but Count Nicholas couldn't accept the reality, even if he looked miserable because he carried the royal family on his shoulders. He accepted the fact that he was defeated, but he couldn't kneel when the thought of the royal family being harmed in the future hit him. He wasn't sure what to do. He had already lost his role as a supporter by showing his weakness here, but in his 60 years of life, he had done nothing but be consistent with the sword. So fighting until the end was the best thing he could do. He forced his heavy, drooping eyes to open, and he pushed himself up to regain the senses in his dull body. "Why are you doing this?" Roman Dmitri asked. Count Nicholas's attack was truly terrifying. He was able to win because of the heavenly demon sword art's middle form, but Count Nicholas was by far the best he had ever fought. If he hadn't met Butler and if he hadn't had a year of imaginary training, then Roman Dmitri wouldn't have been safe going against the roaring flame. And finally, the winner was him. Breaking through the flames, he stepped on the greatest sword of Cairo. The Count smiled. "Why would you ask that? Isn't it natural? I am the first sword of Cairo, and even though I have fallen down, my will hasn't broken yet." His voice kept losing its tone. His defeat wasn't pretty. Count Nicholas was stained in blood, and unlike his name, he looked pitiful. But what could be done? If his sword was broken, he, who wanted to show his will, was also broken. Enough. Tack. He kicked the ground, but his movement was slow. As he ran, blood was dripping on the ground and it looked like he would collapse any time. Roman smiled. Richard Nicholas. The light of Cairo was such a wonderful man. He would not kill him, however, the times were changing and he wasn't going to show him mercy. Roman sent him a message. At the words Roman sent him through mana, the Count ran to Roman with wide eyes. And at that moment, flash! Whack! The sword cut right through his chest, and blood splattered. Count Nicholas's eyes lost focus, and he collapsed as he was charging. Thud. The first sword of Cairo. It was the end of a giant who ruled an era. It was the end of a long journey. Looking at Count Nicholas stained with blood, Willis spoke in a trembling voice. With this, Roman Dmitri is now the #1 in the Cairo kingdom. No one cheered at the shocking results. The match was too much, as everyone stared dumbfounded at the two. Willis also couldn't hide his shock. Even as someone who genuinely enjoyed such matches, this result was too shocking. This is absurd. Roman Dmitri's limit was higher. The Valhalla Empire was keeping an eye on him because of his rapid growth and boundless talent. They admired the way he defeated Cairo's rankers from the 99th to the 2nd. They had no choice but to admit Roman's skills, but they didn't think he could defeat Count Nicholas. According to the information from Valhalla, the Count was stronger than he was 5 years ago. And no matter how much Roman Dmitri tried, it would be impossible to catch up with him. But Roman won with overwhelming strength. Even when Willis witnessed the head-to-head fight unfold, he was not sure what had happened, but that the match just ended. Did we underestimate Roman Dmitri? No, that's not the problem. No matter how much we thought Roman's limits were, the monster keeps surpassing them. Well, a monster appeared in the Cairo kingdom. Roman Dmitri is a person who would have caused a great stir if he had been born in Valhalla. His heart pounded. Count Nicholas was someone who didn't have a high rank in Valhalla. But Roman was someone they had to keep tabs on, especially when he was still in his mid-20s. The challenges for the ranking matches end now. He hastily left that place. The results? They didn't matter anymore. It was time for him to contact his home nation since he had to relay what happened in Cairo. Roman Dmitri is no longer a target we can leave alone. If he adheres to this attitude of not wanting to choose a side, death. If they couldn't have him as an ally, then Roman's existence couldn't be spared. After the end of the fight, Roman headed to the palace. It was time to be recognized for defeating Count Nicholas and to announce that he was now the first and best sword in Cairo. But on the way to the palace, a group blocked Roman's path. Roman Dmitri. I never thought you would defeat Count Nicholas. It was Marquis Benedict. He and the nobles appeared in groups. Troops from each allied family filled the streets, and even normal people hid at this force. The atmosphere was unusual. Marquis Benedict, who used to gaze at Roman with loving eyes, was now showing a cold face. As I watched Count Nicholas collapse, I had a complicated thought. Was I stupid for not expecting it, or have you been hiding your power on purpose all this time? And I thought it was the latter. For now, Marquis Benedict believed he could still control Roman Dmitri. Roman's power wasn't that great, so even after giving him a year, he didn't worry much about him. But as a result, Count Nicholas collapsed. In addition, the Dmitri family formed a coalition in the northeast, and Roman Dmitri proved to be stronger than Count Nicholas, whom the nobles were wary of. This was simply not an acceptable result. What he believed he could control was only revealing his power now. This was flustering. Roman Dmitri was a fox. He didn't know if this was true, but he didn't think Roman was the type to make such a joke. Roman Dmitri didn't need a year to prepare himself. With the justification to prepare for the public ranking, he must have used that time to reorganize the Dmitri family. Roman Dmitri had known he could handle me from the beginning. Even so, I firmly believed that Roman Dmitri had no choice but to follow my words. And thinking that he is just a fool from the outskirts was my mistake. It was different now that Roman Dmitri gained strength. It would no longer be impossible for Roman to oppose them if he put his mind to it. And because of that, he called for the troops of their faction. Even if Cairo was under the rule of the royal family, the guards would still open the gates for them. Marquis Benedict said. 1 year ago. You said you would choose after the rankings are over. Tell us your choice now. Will you follow me and the nobles or make a different choice? If you chose the former, I will accept you, but if it is the latter, you will have to pay for what you have received from me. The moments of acceptance returned with malice. And Marquis Benedict continued in a determined voice, choose. What is your decision? The moment to make a choice has finally arrived. It was the same in Baek Junhyuk's life. As he struggled to live at one point, he had to make a choice. Junhyuk. I will become the leader of the Heavenly Demon sect. I have always treated you as my brother. But from now on, your choice will determine our relationship, so you need to choose. Will you enjoy wealth and honor by my side for the rest of your life, or will you choose to be my enemy until the end? On that day, Baek Ho-yeol, the great young lord of the sect, appeared with a power capable to stain the ground as dark as the night sky. And it wasn't a matter of making a simple choice. With Baek Junhyuk proving his worth and being discussed as the successor to the new position of Heavenly Demon, Baek Ho-yeol wouldn't allow Baek Junhyuk to grow. And there were their other brothers too. At first, the people who were fighting for the same position made the choice to surrender to Baek Ho-yeol. What is the choice for me? His life was full of struggles and every second was hell. He could never sleep peacefully, and many of those who followed him were killed because they were loyal to him. Every time he struggled, he remembered the words and actions of the people who looked at him, and he cursed his fate, wanting to end it all. But the moment he would hold Baek Ho-yeol's hand, life would be convenient. He wouldn't have to struggle, and he'd be able to sleep without worrying about people trying to kill him. But Hyung, I am sorry, but I am a person who cannot live for others. When he was at the bottom position, Baek Junhyuk started his struggle by smashing the head of a boy with a stone. Kill, 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 and more killing. If anyone looked down on him, tried to rise higher than him, or even tried to look at him, he would hurt them and emerge as the winner. His nature would never change. The beast which had tasted blood couldn't bow its head even if it meant death. Baek Ho-yeol had a cold expression on his face. And as he took a step back, his men rushed for Baek Junhyuk. On a night with a full moon, Baek Junhyuk was drenched in blood. Despite quenching his thirst with blood, the shadow of death was close by. Baek Junhyuk slashed the enemies who rushed at him. Finally, as Baek Ho-yeol looked up at him with a shocked look on his face, Baek Junhyuk cut his head off. Slash. And now, I get what you mean. Roman Dmitri looked at Marquis Benedict and the people behind him. This situation reminded him so much about his previous life, and this made him smile. But you see, I don't think I can live for others. That is my choice. At those words, Marquis Benedict's expression twisted horribly.